The workplace is a place that's filled with so many different kinds of personalities. We never know what's going on within somebody's own mind. So today we're going to be talking about mental health awareness in the workplace, how you can get in tuned, how you can advocate for yourself, and how you can advocate for others. Stay tuned. You're really going to want to pay attention to this one. Hi, my name is Linda Sunshine West. I'm the founder and CEO at Action Takers Publishing. One of the things we love to do at Action Takers is to bring our authors on and talk about what they do and how they help the world to make it a better place. One of our authors here with us today is Melanie Schwarz, and she is in this book right here titled Leadership Unveiled: Women Leading with Impact. And before we get into talking about mental health awareness, which is what Melanie does, we're going to talk a little bit about your chapter, Melanie. The title of your chapter is Seek to Understand. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that? And before you do, you can get your copy of this book as well as some free gifts from our authors by going to actiontakerspublishing.com/unveiled. actiontakerspublishing.com/unveiled. Melanie, let's talk a little bit about your chapter, and I can't wait to hear about seek to understand. That's such a good message, first of all, right in the beginning, because a lot of times people speak, listen to speak, they don't listen to hear. And so talk about your chapter in the book.
Yeah. So first of all, thank you, Linda, and thank you for including me in this book. It was just a wonderful experience. My chapter, Seek to Understand, is really about a culture shift for people in their workplace. I want people to lead with empathy more so than lead with, maybe in this old corporate style where it's all top down, if you will. And so when I talk about Seek to Understand, I really want people to think about the humanity side of an employee. Yes, they're there to work. You do pay them, all of those things. But oftentimes what's happening in their personal life or outside of work is really impacting their productivity in work. And if you can start to build relationships with your employees where you understand what's happening in their personal life, oftentimes you make them more productive, you build trust, you build loyalty, and all of those things are amazing for retention. Plus the benefit of the employee having a boss or a company that understands the whole person rather than just the worker.
I love that. There's a word that you mentioned there, a buzzword, so to speak, empathy.
Yeah.
Empathy is something that for me, myself, like it was something I actually had to learn because, of my upbringing or what have you, my personality, the people I know, and all that stuff. And so how do we tap into empathy, and how important is it for us to be able to tap into empathy?
Well, I teach a three-piece series on this. And so the first thing is awareness. If you feel like you're not empathic by just your general nature, one of the things that you can really work on is just awareness. What are people around you? How are they acting? How are they feeling? If somebody's usually really happy and excited to be at work and you notice that they came in and they were kind of down in the dumps, they look tired, something happened, it is okay to say, hey, are you doing all right this morning? How's it going? Because they may come back and say, oh, my kid was up all night, they're sick. There might be a really easy explanation, or you might be seeing a trend that is maybe a mental health concern that you might have down the road. But you won't know that unless you as the leader start leading with empathy, which always starts with awareness.
And what's the second one?
Second one is trust. You have to build trust. People have to trust that if I tell you something, especially personally, like I'm in the middle of a divorce, for example, that you will hold that in confidentiality. Unless they want others to know, you would not be the one to tell people. And then the third thing is really integration, integrating empathy and trust as a core value into your culture and letting people know that that is the expectation. It is the expectation that we care about each other. It is the expectation that we hold trust, and then the other thing is just integrating it in and using it in your everyday work.
Trust is something that sometimes it takes a while to build that trust, but it doesn't take very long to break the trust. And so
That,
yeah, I totally hear you on that. I think it's important for us to, first of all, trust ourselves.
mhm,
And for me, that was a lesson I had to learn, is how to trust myself so I could trust others. And
mhm,
then and moving into that trusting others. And, like this water cooler talk or whatever it's called
mhm,
nowadays, because, people
mhm,
do gossip. And so really knowing who you're talking to
mhm,
ensure that you can hold their trust. So how do you figure out the right people,
mhm. Right.
to listen to you? Because your
Yeah.
chapter title, Seek to Understand, right? So how do I
Mhm.
find the people who will understand and who will listen, who will pay attention to
Mhm.
what's going on with me, who will be, there for me instead of against me?
Yeah, I think that is such an interesting thought, because when you talk about like the water cooler gossip, I actually do a piece on this, because the people that are usually in the gossip circle, if you could peel back their onion and see why that's important to them, is it because they want to belong to a community, so they feel like if they talk about others they are in the know of something? Usually when I talk about seek to understand, it's really about taking yourself out of your personality and putting yourself into someone else's. Now, I'm not saying that's always good. Sometimes other people's personalities really clash with your own. But when I talk seek to understand, especially from a leadership perspective, if you're the leader, you're going to have people with multiple, situations at home, multiple personalities. Maybe they're caring for a senior parent, and maybe they're caring for a spouse. There are so many things in that landscape that we have been trained to not want to know. And I really think it's time that we shift that culture and start wanting to know. I want to know that you're taking care of your senior parent, because that will make a difference in how I run my business. So if you come to me and say, "Gosh, Melanie, I am swamped right now. Could I work from home tomorrow?" If I don't know the reason or the why, or I haven't gotten to know you at all, my answer may be no. We don't. That our policy is no. You need to be in the office. But if I know it's because your parent is in the hospital, I might change my mind and say yes. And that's great for the employer and the leader, because now I still have a productive, cared for employee that can still work in an environment that hadn't had to be shifted based on circumstances. And in today's workforce, there's a lot of open jobs, and so we want to keep the people that are loyal to us, that want to be with us, and quite honestly, that are part of our mission.
Yeah, what I love about this is that it's kind of like that transparency, that
Mhm,
authenticity, and not being afraid of what your employer might think or of you.
mhm,
And the
mhm.
reality is that the more upfront and honest we are with most employers, I don't want to put all
Mhm,
employers
mhm.
into one
Sure.
basket, that's for sure. But the more upfront and honest we are with them, the more they believe in us, and then the more
Mhm.
they trust us.
Yeah.
Because really, the trust goes both ways. The employer has to trust us, well, we also have to trust the employer. And it's by gaining their trust in us that they'll have more respect for us for the most part. And again,
Mhm.
they're having that more
Yeah.
respect for us. And then also we are less likely to lie, call out
Mhm.
sick when we are
Mhm.
not really not sick. There's all these
Right.
different things. So if we can be open, honest, and transparent with our employer, I think just that communication, it
Yep.
creates that understanding, like you said, seek to understand,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
and then that leads to a better work environment. So
Mhm.
if I want to talk about, because I know one of the things that you do is you help people with mental health awareness. So let's talk about the overarching mental
Mhm.
health, what
Mhm.
that is, and
Mhm.
then if we can like dive it, kind of like dive into it a little bit more closely on maybe one particular mental
Sure.
health stigma, maybe, that we talk about that. How can we work through that? So let's talk about mental health.
Let's talk about mental health. So mental health is just a really interesting subject, because a lot of people are scared of it. But what is interesting about mental health in this day and age right now is we're starting to take it to normalize it, to normalize the conversation. So you're almost normalizing mental health as part of your culture and your HR, as you would how to safely use a ladder when you're, changing a light bulb. We want to normalize it so that it's part of an everyday conversation. So if someone is having a struggle, that they don't hide it, because honestly, when you hide the struggle, you actually make the mental health situation worse. And I've had personal experience with this. This is the reason I went into this work. I come to you with actual stories on this. I had a daughter that had a very serious substance use disorder. And I was in a really high level corporate job. I had a lot of responsibility. I was very public. And at one time, she got into some really significant trouble that ended up putting her in the newspaper. And I was scared to death that I was going to lose my job because I had not been transparent with anyone. I had tried to just, push through it, not let anybody see that I was having a hard time. And at work that day, I got a call and it really just threw me. And I kind of, I started crying. And then, of course, there's the shut doors and what's wrong with Melanie and all of these weird things. Had I been more transparent and my boss had known, I would have been able to call him that morning and say, hey, I'm not going to be able to come in today. I'm having trouble with our daughter. If he would have known, he would have said, no problem, Melanie, go ahead and do that. I didn't give him the chance to be the leader with empathy. I didn't, and I think that's the message here for employees. You have to build the trust with your leader so that you could tell them. And I hadn't done that. And so after that experience, I thought, boy, I didn't handle that right. I did not get fired. I did not lose my job. Nothing bad happened to me. All the things that I had projected did not happen. And the truth of it is 40% of your workforce has something going on, a mental health challenge, a substance use disorder. They are possibly suicidal. They may be caring for someone that's in that category. 40%. That's a lot of people. If you have an office of 100 people, that's 40 of them, which is almost half. And then you've probably got a few that are just not, maybe on the verge of it or not quite there yet, but it's coming. And so I just think that if we can bring mental health awareness to the workplace, we will be a better culture, I think, and more successful, quite honestly.
What I find interesting about the term mental health, I wish that they would come up with a different term because mental health, there's good and there's bad, right? And there are gray areas. And so really, like, we all have mental health, whether it's good or bad. And so I think it's a poor term to use, in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, you'll appreciate this because we had this conversation. We did focus groups around this because nobody really wants to talk mental health awareness in the workplace. And so we call it Mind Wellness University. And so it's basically an education format where we go in and do trainings, really basic trainings, nothing invasive, nothing where you have to be a counselor or anything. And then we pick one person out of your team to be your advocate. So who's the advocate on your team that understands mental health, maybe has had their own issues, but also is willing to do the training so that they can be kind of that leader within your organization? And I usually prefer it not to be the leader or the HR director. I like it to be somebody that's a regular employee day to day, and they become the resource for the team. So everybody knows Melanie's the mental health advocate. So if I'm having issues or I need resources or I don't understand my EAP, she's the person I go to, and she will confidentially help me through the needs that I'm having. It's a wonderful model.
Yeah, there's a lot of employers now that are bringing in outside companies, to do that employee awareness program. I'm not sure what it stands for. Is it EAP? I don't know.
EAP is Employee Assistance Program.
Okay, yeah. So they bring those in, but there are also companies out there that aren't, like, they're not big enough to bring one in, or they don't feel the need to bring something like that in. How do you know as an employer when it's time to bring in outside help? Because sometimes the inside help or inside, you may be too embarrassed to talk to somebody. So 100%. When is it time to bring in an outside person?
I think if you build this culture correctly, you'll probably catch it sooner, which is the other benefit of it. So if you have someone that's struggling, and I'll use the example of having somebody that has a substance use disorder. Maybe they're drinking all the time. You know that that's happening. You're aware of it. You maybe have written them up or something along those lines. But if you have the mental health advocate on your team, they can actually come into that conversation and start having a conversation about, hey, do you want us to help you find some place that you can go? Are you using our EAP? I think it's interesting. The statistic is only 7% of employees use EAP because they think that their employer is tracking that, which is actually not
Right.
true, but people believe that, right? And so you have to build the culture so it isn't punitive, right? So if I get in trouble because I have a substance use disorder, and I lose my job, that's a punitive model. The model I'm talking about is I have awareness that someone has a substance use disorder and I get them help so that they can come back to my team. They may have to leave for a while and go to possibly treatment or some sort of day treatment, but they can come back and they're welcomed back because they went and got the help that they needed. It's a completely different mindset than what we work in currently.
Interesting. Yeah. How do you move? How do you shift from, because those are like vast differences. So how do you shift, shift an employee or model to that?
Well, two interesting things are happening. The first is, we have a lot of baby boomers retiring right now, and a lot of this attitude of we don't want to know about your personal life, keep it personal, actually happened within that generation. It is not their fault because that's how they were trained. They were trained not to be keep your life separate. But what's interesting is your new employees that are coming in, your young professionals are expecting this. They expect a culture where we're talking openly about it. They expect a culture where when they say, hey, I have a therapy appointment every Wednesday at 3, the leader says, great, enjoy it. Not, well, you're going to need to take PTO and, that I need you to do that off of hours, whatever. The new generation of workforce is pushing this. They are going to be the drivers. And that's something that, although we sometimes get frustrated with the younger generation, they are pushing mental health awareness in their work environments. They want it. They want to talk about it. They are very open about their situations. And so now we're really having to really retrain the leaders, if you will, the senior leaders, to adapt to that environment and realize that it's a benefit. It builds a healthier work culture. And quite honestly, they're your future. You need to adapt to some of their needs.
Yeah, I totally agree. I like to say that I'm a millennial in a boomer body because, I am a boomer and I am literally an open book. Like I'll say, and I found that exactly like what you're saying there. Now, I wasn't always that way because, like you said, I
Yeah.
wasn't trained that way, but it's something that I've adopted and it has changed my life so much for the better
Mhm.
because I don't have these fears of talking about or speaking my truth. Like what is the truth about what's going on? I don't have those fears anymore. And so it just has made my life a lot better, being that
Mhm.
way. So let's talk
Yeah.
about that a little bit, like
Yeah.
authenticity in the workplace. How much is too much to share?
Well, I think that's an interesting subject because, yes, there are people that are complete oversharers, and there's people like me that are so empathic that they just take on everything too, right? Like I just absorb everyone's emotions and it's too much. And so you really do have to find that nice middle balance. And I think the way that you get there is, again, you're normalizing the conversation so it's not like a taboo subject that we only talk about if somebody's in trouble. We talk about it in our staff meetings. Maybe we have a mental health minute, just like I'm working with a group of trade people in the plumbing industry, and they do a safety minute every morning. They do a huddle every morning with a safety tip just to make sure, and they have to do it for their trades and for workers' comp. And I said, what if we added a mental health minute with your safety minute? Right. So we're talking about, like I used my ladder experience, like how to use the ladder appropriately. And then the next minute is about how to recognize potential suicidal ideation. So it's just like, here are 3 things that might indicate that someone is having a really hard time. Isn't one person in particular. We don't point anybody out. We're just providing information. And if you have a problem or you think that that's happening, please go see Melanie or go see your HR person. So they know that they're supported. They know that it's okay. That's an extreme scenario, but it certainly is happening often, because of the 40% that I talked about that are having a mental health crisis,
Mm-hmm.
2% of your workforce are having suicidal ideation. And so
Oh,
there's a very, it's not a lot of people, but it's enough that it should be on your radar.
one is too many.
Right.
Yeah.
hmm
Yeah,
And
definitely.
if one were to happen at your workplace, it is devastating. I've gotten to come in on the backside of that and see the devastation of, how did we not know? What should we have done? And so when that happens, it makes my work really relevant on the other end. Like I can
Yeah.
use that as an example of, wow, we do need to start. And that's why I called my company UpStream. To be honest, I wanted to go in more of an upstream thinking pattern and start solving problems at the prevention end rather than at the problem end.
Well, that's good. I'm so glad you've done that. So how can people connect with you? We have your website,
Sure.
leadupstream.com, but when they
Yep.
reach out to you, who's a good person for, to reach out to you that you can work
Sure.
with?
Yeah, I love to work with companies. I live in Montana, so I have a lot of small businesses in our community that I'm working with. So a lot of people, 25 to 100 employees is usually where it falls. And the reason that is because when you get to 100 plus employees, usually you have a pretty robust HR team, and maybe you're able to afford some additional resources. In that 0 to 100 workforce, oftentimes you need to use some of your internal resources, which are your people. And so this mental health advocate program is actually really built for that size of a company. And like I said, we call it Mind Wellness University. So it's not just trainings for the advocate. We have a complete library, mental library on all subjects from conflict resolution to time management to how to talk to your boss about going to therapy, for example. So it's a full library and also a private online community, social community that you can engage with as well.
That's awesome. And again,
Mhm.
you go to
Yeah,
leadupstream.com to connect with Melanie. And
yeah.
I'm curious, of the employers that, like, from your experience, of the employers that are currently, using help with, the mental health
Mhm.
advocacy and mental health awareness, do you
Mhm.
find that there's like a certain type of industry that's more likely to have help than others? Or do you find that there are some that are like, oh my, they really need it, but they're not doing it, kind of thing?
Yeah, it's been interesting. And we actually developed a second product because of this. We do find a lot of professional services are very open to this concept. So we have some law firms, for example, some banks, some professional services. Where we're trying to get into is businesses that maybe have more of a frontline customer service type of team that is, engaging with people all of the time, not their fellow employees, but the community and the customers, because that is also a really hard place to be right now. Customers
Yeah.
have gotten a little bit radical. So it's like you want to have some skills there. So we're doing some prevention training as well for people on kind of that frontline customer service piece.
Yeah, you just made me think of some of the TikTok videos I've seen.
Yeah. Yeah.
Customers are like, "Oh my god," they are like off the rails,
Yeah.
and I'm like,
Yeah.
"Is this real? Is this
Yeah.
stuff real?" I have not
Apparently
witnessed
it
it
is.
myself, thank goodness.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know what I would do if I witnessed something like that, and even for customers,
I
like, even
know.
getting them, like, how do you handle a situation like this
Mhm.
and stuff like that. They could have videos playing inside those stores and restaurants and stuff, so
Well, it's interesting. We were just recently asked to do a training on how to intervene if you see something negative happening, like you're in a restaurant or you're in a business and somebody is acting up and mistreating or abusing the worker. And so, what is the way to intervene appropriately without yourself getting hurt or, any negative repercussions on that? And so, it's a new training we haven't filmed yet, but it's in the works.
It's interesting you mentioned that because something just came to mind is like 20 years ago, I was working at a law firm, and one of the other I was a secretary, and one of the other secretaries, we were talking about something. I was training her on something, and her boss came over and he didn't know I was there, and he yelled at her. And
Mhm.
in that moment, like I hid from him because I didn't like him. He was scary.
Mhm. Yep.
And then I stood up and I said, "Don't you ever talk to her like that." And he said, "She's my secretary. I can talk to her however I want." And then we just like, I went and stood up for her. Well, here's what was
Mhm.
interesting about this. So I ended up,
Mhm.
talking to HR. He got disciplined. He was a
Mhm.
lawyer. I was a secretary and I got him disciplined. And here
Mhm.
was the thing. The secretary had no idea that she was being treated poorly. And
Mhm.
that was like a huge eye-opening experience for me because it was what she was accustomed to, not from him, but from past experiences, past
Mhm.
relationships, past employers.
Yep.
She was used to this behavior. And
Mhm.
so she didn't even know he was doing something wrong. And so
Yeah.
sometimes it does take an advocate to
Mhm.
see what's going on and to
Mhm.
bring shine a light on it so that
Mhm.
things can change. With that said, he did change. Apparently, he had been on some kind of medication. He had like minor schizophrenia, and
Mhm.
he had been taking medication, and he had been off of his medication, and that's when he just kind of like flipped his
Mhm.
lid. So they did discipline him, told him, if you ever go off your medication again, we will fire you. And
Yeah.
so anyway, he
Yeah.
changed. He
Yeah.
changed. And he was
That's all.
60 years old. So you
Yeah.
can teach an old dog new tricks.
Anybody can learn this. Anybody can learn this. Yeah. You just have to want to, and you also have to believe in it. And I think that's a real key too. You have to genuinely believe that other people's lives have real value. They don't
Yeah.
just work for you. They actually have real value.
Yeah. Yeah. So maybe the way I handled it wasn't right, but it was a spur of the moment type of situation. And I just flew off the handle. I just got so mad at him that I
Yeah.
couldn't hold it inside. I had held it inside for a year and a half, working with that
Exactly.
guy.
And then it's the explosion moment, right? And you're
Blew
like,
my top,
oh, I wish
blew
I'd
my
have
top.
I wish I'd have thought about that a while ago. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. But
Mhm.
anyway, so this is awesome. I love the work you do. I think it's so
Oh, thank
important
you.
because mental health awareness, what did you call it again?
Mind Wellness University is what we call it.
Mind Wellness University, so
Yeah.
much better than mental
Yep.
health. Because I
Yep.
think a lot of times when people hear the words mental health, that they think of,
Mhm.
the loony bin, for
Yep.
lack of
Yep.
a better term. And
Yep.
so that's why I think there's such a bad stigma against
Mhm.
it.
Yeah.
And so really bringing this awareness out, so people can reach you again at leadupstream.com. If you're
Yes.
experiencing, like you have employees that you feel like you could really use some kind of help like this, please
Mhm.
reach out to Melanie. The more people that Melanie can get in front of, if you know somebody who could use Melanie's help, please reach out to her, because the more people that we make aware of what's going on, the better this planet becomes. And that's what this is all about. Like, what can we do to raise the vibration of the planet, to make this a better
Mhm.
place for people to live, and to make it so that people aren't so scared to talk about what's going on in their personal lives. So Melanie, why don't you share last tip for us here today?
Last tip for you is I think everybody should go read when you go read the book Leadership Unveiled. I used three of my favorite quotes, and one of the quotes that I used was the "In the Arena" by Theodore Roosevelt. So my homework for you is to go read that quote, because it really talks about being engaged, getting involved. Don't sit on the sidelines and let things happen around you and then regret it. Get in the arena and actually make change in your community, in your workplace, with your relationships. It's really fulfilling when you actually participate and engage in it. So I really encourage you to consider bringing Mind Wellness University into your workplaces.
Awesome. I love that. I totally agree with everything you just said there. Again, you can get your copy of the book, Leadership Unveiled, Women Leading with Impact. Go to actiontakerspublishing.com/unveiled. While you're there are free gifts from some of our authors, so go cash in on those free gifts. Melanie, thanks for doing the work you do to bring awareness to mental health state, to the mind wellness, and making this planet a much better place. Truly appreciate you, what you're doing, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Linda.
You took the overwhelm out of the whole entire process. You said you set the guidelines, you said how many words to have. And it's like, once I sat down and started typing, it just all came out so quickly and so easily. And I loved it. And I had fear to write. And I know about that. I know about that blockage within myself, but it just was so amazing how easy the process was working with Action Takers Publishing.